hunting,
fishing,
cooking,
camping,
conservation,
travel,
gardening,
photography, family.
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 This is the Outdoor Rules Podcast. All right, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Outdoor Rules Podcast. I am really excited to bring you this episode today. It's one that we've been talking about, honestly, almost since the podcast started. And I'm going to open it up with a little bit of a story, and then we'll introduce our guests. But the story that I have to tell is about a hat, oddly enough. And when I started working in Yellowstone, I worked the first season there in the summer and worked through kind of mid-fall. And as that season wore on, I was working with lots of folks, who were horseback, who were, real authentic Western type people. And as the weather got colder, they all switched from cowboy hats to these kind of fitted wool hats with ear flaps. And so I left Yellowstone. That would have been like 2003, I think. I left there and headed home, and then very quickly got a call saying that they had some winter work for me to do, and would I come back? And of course, I jumped at that opportunity to go back. And on my way back, I thought, I have to get a better hat, one, to keep my head warm, and two, to fit in better, with the folks that I was working around. And so I stopped in Rapid City, South Dakota at the Cabela's and walked in there, and there was a rack of hats. And kind of the first hat I looked at on this rack, I thought, that is exactly what I'm looking for. I put one on. I thought, wow, this thing really fits me well. It's just right. I bought it. I didn't think much about the brand of hat or anything else about it, just that it was the right kind of wool hat. I took it to Yellowstone. I started wearing it virtually every day. And then not only was I wearing it for work, I started all of the ice fishing and the hunting I was doing. I was wearing the hat. It just very quickly became a piece of gear that I always had with me. And then even through the coming years, I would take this hat on most backcountry trips, and I worked for about a decade in Yellowstone. We worked long 8 to 10 day stretches in the backcountry, and it's almost always cold in the high country in Yellowstone. And so I always had this hat with me. And of course, at some point along the way, I realized that there was a story inside this hat. And so invariably on these long backcountry trips, you would get to the end of a long, exhausting day. Late in the trip, everybody would be sitting around camp. The conversation would lull. And as sort of a pick-me-up or just a conversation starter or even a little bit of a goof, I would ask the people that I was with, do you know the story of Stormy Kromer? And almost nobody said yes to that question. A lot of the people who had been around me long enough, because I did this dozens of times, would, of course, roll their eyes. But there would usually be somebody new there. And so when they said no, I would take the hat off and I would read the Stormy Kromer story. And inside the hat is this story. This is the story verbatim. George Stormy Kromer was a semi-pro ball player and railroad engineer who always lost his hat to the gusts that blew through his locomotive. So he asked his wife, Ida, to put needle and thread to one of his old baseball caps. The Kromer they created in 1903 is now legendary for its comfort, warmth, durability, and grip when the wind blows. So that's the story. I would read it and, conversations would start from there. And I literally did that for a decade while I worked in Yellowstone. I probably even did it a time or two after I moved here to New Mexico. But anyway, that hat, which is called the Stormy Kromer, and which I'm wearing right now, and we are doing video of this, so if anybody's going to watch, you can go to YouTube and watch the video. It's a fitted wool hat with ear flaps, and it is everything it says it is: comfort and warmth when the wind blows. So that's kind of my long story about this hat that I absolutely love, and that to this day, the original one I bought in Rapid City, South Dakota, is 100% a part of my routine cold weather activity gear, whether it's hunting or fishing or anything else outside when it's cold. This amazing hat that I will always cherish. It's kind of become one of my most cherished pieces of outdoor gear. So with that, there's a little bit more to the story that I want to tell, but with that, I got a couple guests here with me. Caitlin and GT are here.
How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great.
Hello.
Hi, Caitlin. And then we have a very special guest with us today. Bob, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell everybody who you are.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bob Jacquart. I'm myself and my two daughters own Stormy Kromer up in Ironwood, Michigan. We're the ones that kind of revived it after it was pretty stagnant. In 2001, we bought it. And we've got lots of stories to tell how this group weaves itself together here. So I'm excited to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, so this is amazing. Thanks so much, Bob, for coming on. It's kind of a dream, I think, and I really mean it from the beginning. We've been talking about Stormy Kromer and whether, if we could get you to come on, because there's a whole bunch of connections here, which I think are really fun. Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit about that Stormy Kromer story, where it started, how you came to be involved, and then we'll get on to some of these other connections.
Okay. Sure. Well, I lived in probably the main selling center of where the Kromer cap was sold, even though it was made first in Kaukauna, Wisconsin, and then in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then in Columbus, Wisconsin. Most of the hats that were made were sent up to Ironwood, Michigan, and Bessemer, Michigan, and the UP of Michigan. And so it's just part of me all my life. I wore a hat long before I bought the company, which makes it even more fun for me. But I've got a 1942 picture of my grandfather wearing a Stormy Kromer hat, and he happened to work for the same railroad as Stormy Kromer, and their birth years were 8 years apart, so I know darn well my grandpa knew Stormy Kromer, and so there's these magnificent ties, and I just wore a hat. And so George started the hat business in Kaukauna, moved it to Milwaukee in the 30s, and then in the late 60s it moved to Columbus, Wisconsin. And that's where it was when we bought it. And we've got all kinds of quirky stories that we've learned. I mean, some of them Tim has never heard, but like his passion was baseball. If you asked him in his grave what he wanted to be remembered at is not for the hat you and I are wearing on our heads. It's for his love of baseball. We have a photo of the Kaukauna baseball team with Stormy Kromer standing in the middle, there was one time when our sewing company wanted to make those throwback jerseys. So in the black and white picture, we couldn't tell what color Kaukauna was printed in across the chests of the players. So was it navy blue or black or brown or whatever? So we called the city of Kaukauna and they didn't know. And then we found the Minor League Baseball Historical Society. And we found out that the team I was asking about was literally in the record books of minor league baseball for having the largest loss of any baseball team ever. The team that we were trying to duplicate the jerseys of lost the game 146-0.
Oh, wow. That's a rough game.
Yeah. So there's all this crazy stuff about this crazy guy. One of his instincts, one of the beliefs was as a coach and a manager was that his outfielders would be more acclimated to the sun if they before every game, they stared into the sun for 30 minutes. So all of his outfielders were blind by the time the game started.
That might explain the 146 to nothing.
Yeah, they were all blind. They were hitting them in the head or whatever. So anyway, there's this quirky guy, and there's this company just kind of plugging along. And what ended up happening with the company that we separated from was called the Kromer Cap Company. George and Ida Kromer. Ida was his wife's name. She put the ear flaps on the first baseball hat, and then that's kind of how the story goes that you just told. But what also happened was the Kromer Cap Company made a second hat called their welding cap. And the welding cap was a throwaway cotton, lightweight cotton, inexpensive hat that was actually, you and I are wearing a baseball hat with ear flaps. Mm-hmm. The cotton hat that they made for a welding cap was even more puffy. It actually had a band around where I'm showing you right now, around the whole bottom, so that the top of the hat lifted above your head. So there was this great big giant space between the top of your head and your hat, so that when a welding spark hit your hat and started your hat on fire, you had enough time to get it off and stomp it out on the ground. But what happened is, a lot of people would remember this, but those hats got crazy colorful, looked like somebody chopped up an American flag. They were polka dot, they were flowered and yellow and black, and it just crazy colors. In colors, that hat became the unofficial emblem of the U.S. Welders and Pipefitters Union. So when I grew up in Ironwood, there's so much synergy with Ironwood, Michigan. The two main pipelines that go across the United States are 5 miles north from where I was born. They're about 300 yards apart, and they went through 4 years apart, I think they went across. And when the time came, those pipeliners, all Oklahoma and Texas license plates came to our town. They were the guys that followed, just were gone all the time, like you were in Yellowstone, just digging ditches. They all wore these colorful caps. And what happened was the Americans started wearing those welding caps on offshore oil rigs all over the world. So now the welding cap is getting exposure all over the world. And a group of Americans in Greenland in the North Atlantic was big. They were doing the 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and they were doing a vacation in Europe, and they were sitting in a German restaurant, and a guy named Ernst, and I forget his name, but Ernst was married to Katerina Karman from the Karman Gia family, the Karman Design Company. And he was a cool German, spoke, European English, and he was neat and old and unique and quirky like Mr. Grossman was. But he asked those guys, he saw him in the restaurant, he asked those guys, where do those hats come from? And, they said Milwaukee, and so Ernst started selling welding caps over in Europe. And in 2001, the two product line company, the Kromer Cap Company, that had this hat, which they called their Blizzard cap. We call it the original because we've made quite a bit of variances, but the Blizzard cap and the welding cap. And sometime in May of 2001, they were planning production for the year, and their production year was June 1st to May 31st. They realized they had 50 weeks of orders for welding caps and 2 weeks of orders for our hat. So on June 1st of 2001, the Kromer Cap Company stopped making this cap that you and I are wearing. So it's fun to tell this story because this is the story of some idiot in Ironwood, Michigan, taking a chance on a product that somebody else discontinued. It's just crazy. Every time I say it, it's just kind of fun. But and so if you think about that's Milwaukee. That happened in Milwaukee. They're not making these hats anymore. Now, two other things were going on in Ironwood, Michigan that made this happen. One was there was a company called Jacquart Fabric Products, which is my family. We were and still are a contract sewing company. So we make things for other people. We have a military contract right now. We make tents for a really cool company called Snow Trekker. I don't know if you've ever seen a Snow Trekker tent.
No,
they're winter camping tents.
I'm going to
They're
check
the
them out.
small white canvas. Yeah, that's premiered. They're made in Wisconsin as well. But actually, they're sold in Wisconsin, and they've been always made in Ironwood, Michigan. We've made every tent for them. We're very proud of that. And that, so we're a contractor, and what we were able to do and survive in the sewing business before Stormy Kromer was find these niches, find the things that China can't do. The batches are too small, odd things, lots of creativity, maybe lots of SKUs. And so that's who we were. So we were up there sewing. I was the owner and the CEO at the time, and I actually owned a Kromer cap made by the Kromer Cap Company. But when I did the deal, and I didn't say, I go back in 1964, Stormy and Ida sold the business to a guy from Milwaukee named Dick Grossman. So Dick Grossman's the middle guy of ownership. I'm the end guy. And what happened was when I did the deal, he gave me a list of his dealers. And so there's this sheet of paper I can remember seeing. This is before emails and anybody being electronic, and it was all paper. And so he gave me a list of dealers, and there were 18 dealers when we started, and 14 of the 18 dealers were the air gas company selling welding supplies.
Right.
So there really were, at the beginning of this, for us, for the Blizzard cap or the original Stormy Kromer cap or whatever you want to call it, that we started with 4 dealers. But what the hat gave those 4 dealers was this unique product that brought tourists into their store. And anybody that knows the UP, you came to Ironwood and you would go to the dealer in Ironwood and you'd buy one of those Kromer caps, those quirky Kromer caps, like you would, however you want to describe it. And then you'd go downtown to any of the restaurants and have a pasty. I mean, we were known for pasties and Kromers, and I'm assuming that there's a small group of people that know what a pasty is, but
I know what a pasty is.
That's a whole other episode, I guess.
It's a food item. We'll just leave it at that for right now.
Yeah. And so what happened was, just after they discontinued the hats, the local dealer called in an order to Milwaukee and said, I want to fill up my store. Tourists are coming. It's, the middle of June, and I want to get hats for the tourists coming. And they said, we're not making hats anymore. And this guy was very opinionated, and he was really angry. And the best way to describe him was, at the time, the city of Ironwood had a $20 business permit. To do business in the city of Ironwood, it cost $20 a year.
Bucks.
And he thought it was the stupidest thing, so he paid with 1,999 pennies. So somebody'd have to sit there and count for 4 hours and see if there was a penny there. So this guy now finds out that there's not hats any made. And it turned out that we were acquaintances, but we weren't friends. But we happened to be at the same restaurant, and he came in and he came over to my booth and he put his finger in my face and he said, they quit making Kromer caps. You better do something about it. And I said, get me the number and I'll buy the dang company. So I bought the company. I called Mr. Grossman up. He guaranteed me nothing would ever come of this. Okay. He said, this just you'll never do anything. He said, the problem is, you're sitting right in the epicenter of where this hat is always sold, and you'll never sell it outside of the market. Okay. So I did it anyway. And originally there was a 5-paragraph contract. Now keep in mind, I'm not really buying his business. So this is not a legal transaction. I don't need his federal ID number. I don't need his tax numbers. If we'd have known each other just a little better, we would have been able to do it with a handshake. I'll make one hat, you make the other hat, and we're fine. But anyway, I wrote a document that was, paragraph 1 said he'd let me in his factory. Paragraph 2 said he'd give me the names of the dealers. Paragraph 3 said he would give me the names of the raw material suppliers where I'd buy wool and things like that from. And then paragraph 4 said we would never make a welding cap, so that he was going to keep making welding caps and we were going to be fine. And then 5 said I'd pay him a sum of money. And I stuck like the 4th or 5th try at the wording of that document in the fax machine. This is before emails, and so we're waiting the old-fashioned way. And he calls me and says, I'm going to sign this. And I remember saying, Dick, this is so cool. What a great story to tell my grandchildren. I did this without a lawyer. Right. And he says, oh, my goodness, Bob, I'm so sorry. Speaking of your of your grandchildren, did you know there was a little golden book written about Stormy Kromer? Now, I probably should have a little golden book to show you, but there's a little golden book, my childhood reading book. There's a little golden book called Mr. Puffer Bill that is written about Stormy Kromer. It's a fictitious story, but when you turn to the second page, it says, Mr. Puffer Bill is really George Stormy Kromer, who worked for the Chicago Northwestern Railroad. And it's the coolest thing. It was last published in 1965. And Mr. Grossman owned 4 copies of that book. And in this big trade agreement, I literally added paragraph 6 that would say he would give me 2 of his 4. He would get 2 and I would get 2. And so I brought it up here. To Ironwood, and we started making hats. And our contract business had, the banks would call it an 800-pound gorilla. So we were making product for another customer they were wonderful people. It was really profitable. It's everything you'd want in a contract customer. And they were growing like crazy. And this little business, now keep in mind, I bought a hat business that was enough work for 18 people for 2 weeks.
Right.
So that's how it started. So, but then what happened? And in that first year that we made them, or we owned it, we did not sell any hats because we needed practice. We didn't exactly know what we would do. We figured we would wait until the following fall of 2002. And then I was walking downtown Ironwood. It was June of 2002. So I owned the business about 7 months. And our Mrs. Kangas, the sweet little old lady that ran our 4-H program in town. So she likes cows and chickens and goats and pigs and kids. And she's the sweetest, apple pie lady you'd ever want to meet. And she came up to me on the street and said, "Are Kromer caps really made in my hometown?" And she's like proud, and it's like, I'm kind of feeling it. And so I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, I need to show you something." And so she reaches in her purse and she hands me this small photo, the old 4x5 photo or whatever those were. And she's elderly, so she gave me the wrong photo on the first try. But the first picture she gave me was somebody took a picture of the grave marker where her dog or cat died. So somebody made one of those small crosses, and somebody, so somebody was standing up over this cross, looking down on an angle, taking a picture of the grave marker of a dog or cat. And I'm trying to be polite and give it back to her. And she said, as I'm giving it back to her, she said, "That's the grave marker where my husband Dave's Kromer cap is buried on Isle Royal." And I go, "What?" And so now I look closer, and this cross I'm looking at is actually a stone cemetery cross with the guy's, birth year and death year. And so he had a fishing charter business. He loved to fish. Isle Royal is a national park in the middle of Lake Superior. A lot of your listeners should know that, right?
Yep.
And after he died, his fishing buddies called the U.S. Park Service. There's literally an easement from the U.S. Park Service for a hat burial ground for Dave Kangas's hat to be buried in perpetuity.
Crazy. Oh, man.
And they bought an ashes urn and rolled the hat up in the ashes urn, and the ashes urn became the hat coffin. And it's still out there. Like, people take pictures of it and post it on Facebook and say, "What on earth is this?" And
wow.
It's just kind of fun.
Road trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm driving back from lunch, and Mrs. Kangas, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, and I can be very hard on it's fun because I know who I am and I'm honest with myself, and I've got no business to consumer knowledge at all. I'm a B2B guy. I don't have a brand. In fact, I had actually in the first year, somebody will have fun making fun of me after when he gets to talk, but I actually promised Mr. Grossman that I would never use the Kromer name, that I didn't need it. So for about 8 months, we made a generic Blizzard cap. And so now I've got all this in my head, and I don't have a good brand. I don't look good. And one of the little things that a lot of people would know that live here in the Midwest is 40 years ago, people that lived in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan we've always been called Yoopers.
Yep.
Upper Peninsula, U and a P, and it turns into Yooper. And when I was in my 20s, if you were designated a Youper, that meant you had an outhouse, you didn't have running water, you didn't speak good English, and you didn't have all your teeth. I mean, that's what a Youper was. And I, honest to goodness, there's nothing I hated more than that. My little manufacturing company in the early 80s, UP Office Supply, told me I was the first one to own a fax machine in the Upper Peninsula, and because I wanted to be Mr. Technology, And so I was not one of those darn Youpers. I can handle myself, and it was always fun. Well, now I don't have a good mark. I don't look branded really well. I don't look that polished. And I said to myself, I wonder if I could get some advice from one of those marketing ad agencies, one of those big places. And so what I did was, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was smart enough to know that lawyers, doctors, insurance agents, and marketing companies will give you a free interview hour, and you can get some free stuff out of them during the interview.
There you go.
So I made 5 appointments. I had a friend, or I don't know if the other person in the room remembers a lady named Mo Daly, but I'll never forget Mo Daly. She was a PR lady, and she was a friend of my cousin's, and she made 5 introductions for me. And so I made 5 appointments, 3 in one day and 2 in the other. And I had a hat that we made, and I had a couple of the black and white pictures of Stormy Kromer, and I went to one holding the pictures in the hat, and I said, if you work with me, what would you do with this thing? And then I got some free stuff from them. And then I went to the next agency and the next agency. And I think it was number 4 out of 5. The 4th one I interviewed, if I recall, somebody said to me, you don't have a clue what you've got here. And that's how the whole thing started for me. To actually turn the whole thing was an understanding of what I had. So maybe I'll just leave it there for a little bit, and we can I'll come up for air in case you have some questions on all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, like you said, you bought the hat, but you didn't buy the name and the story, right? I mean, that to boil it down is where you stand at this point in the story. That's fair.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a huge leap probably to figure out where this is going, but if it's all right with you, Bob, I'll finish the story that I started, and then we'll get into the rest of this.
Yeah, sure. This is great.
Yeah. So,
hey, let me just clarify though, for the audience, they should prepare themselves. This is like a set of Russian nesting dolls, this story, right?
It is
a story in a story in a story in a story.
Right.
So, okay, cool.
So, I told that story at the beginning about how I read this story out of the hat to people, just, random. And in the fall of 2009, early in the fall, we kind of took the first big backcountry trip with a brand new set of employees, interns, some new folks in Yellowstone that had started in August. And we went into Grayling Creek, one of the most amazing backcountry settings in all the park, hard place to get into, no trails. And there's this very lovely young woman that has recently started with us there, working with me on our crew. And so this exact thing that I described happens. We're probably 6 or 7 days into an 8 or 10 day trip. We're sitting around in the evening, and the conversation slows down. I take this hat, this one I'm wearing right now, off of my head, and I read the story. And I had not been around this young lady for all that long, but I knew that she was relatively quiet and pretty soft-spoken. Didn't speak up a lot. I read the story, and of course the young lady is Caitlin. And Caitlin says,
my dad put that story in that hat.
And I'm just like, what? Your dad put the story in the hat? She's like, yeah. So this, I really think, is legitimately one of the first kind of personal connections that Caitlin and I made.
Yeah, it was part of our meet cute, or whatever you call it.
Sure, there you go, meet cute. It's part of our origin story. So this
wow,
Stormy Kromer cap is really genuinely part of how our relationship started. And of course, at that point, we were a long time from dating or anything that was to come. But
that's the story I keep hearing. Yeah, they didn't date forever.
That's true.
She worked for him. They didn't date.
Yeah, not till a couple months later.
But then we did get back from the trip, and Tim very kindly then sent me a few things, including a couple Stormy Kromer posters, and the one that I remember well, it was one of the advertising pieces said, "A frosty head only looks good on beer."
Right.
Yeah.
And I framed that one and I put it up. But obviously, Bob, the story that you're getting to, kind of where this intersection is that the firm that you were talking about in Milwaukee was Hansen Dodge, that you were a co-founder of, right, Tim?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean that I would love, to hear kind of how things progress from there, and Bob and Tim, your sort of perspectives on, how it went from Bob being in that situation of owning the hat but not the story, and how you got from there to where Stormy Kromer is today, or even to where it got to me walking into a Cabela's and picking the hat off a shelf.
Yeah. So, hey, Bob, finish the last end of that story in terms of why you came in, you sat down with us. We told you were crazy or something. I don't know. and you walked out, and then you hired us to do work with you. Out of the 5 people, why did you decide to work with us?
That statement, and I was a cyclist, and you had a little.
Oh, yeah.
You were doing a little work for a cycling company at the time.
That's right.
And there was, and I liked the energy, and I liked the size of your company. It wasn't too big, and it wasn't too small. And I liked you and Ken. It was just nice being around you. So yeah,
cool.
And that was just and it's really funny because a professor from Harvard got a grant to study rural businesses, and I got interviewed, and she asked me about this, how I make big decisions, and I basically said, I think I have a really good gut. And she said, well, my PhD's in gut is actually in gut decision making, and you have no idea how powerful gut decision making is. And so what you actually are processing when you're putting that all together, you're a nice guy, you're honest, it was just like we just kind of hit it off, and all that stuff goes into it. And I will favor nice people over just about anything, that as long as it works for me. So anyway, it was really good. And then should I keep going? Just a few little things that happened next.
Go for it. Yeah.
Or do you want to? What did you remember about that encounter?
I remember what you said just a minute ago, which was, oh my God, there's like an amazing story here, an amazing opportunity. And as a brand builder, marketer, stories like authentic, real, powerful stories are far and few between, and when it comes to marketing products. And so when you kind of laid out what Stormy Kromer was about, we immediately, Ken and I both were like, oh my God, this is amazing. We go, okay, so we can work with that brand name. And then you said, oh no, I don't own the brand name. And I think our first piece of advice to you that you probably got for free in that meeting was go buy the brand, get the rights to use the brand name. And
it's there's a cool story about how that happened. And yeah, I when I tell the story, somebody had the look on their face like, you idiot. You don't have the rights to the Kromer name. I'm fine with that. It's okay. I don't mind that, because and it goes back to, we are who we are as characters, as people. And for some reason, I never have been able to figure out how to tell someone they can trust me. Like, I'm an honest, nice person, I just can't do that. In fact, when we start with a new company, a contracting company, I said, we're not going to say anything about us. I'll give you some references. But I just want you to know that our goal is that you call us in a year and say, I'm really glad I found you. I mean, that's how we live. I never say it. So now I'm with Mr. Grossman about in the first round, and I'm thinking, do I need the name? Well, I don't really need the name. And if I do ask for the name, he's going to want to understand that I'm not going to screw it up because he's got the name too. And so how on earth am I going to explain that to somebody who doesn't know me without saying, you can trust me, trust me, I'm a nice guy, that kind of thing. So, So I just said, I'll just leave it. So now Hansen Dodge tells me I got to go get the name. So what I was able to do, it's funny how this worked. And this is all around, my wimpy personality or whatever. But the one thing Mr. Grossman and I had in common was a thread salesman. We bought thread from Mark. Okay. And Mark is, he shouldn't be, but he is our family's biggest worshiper. He just thinks our family is the coolest thing in the world. And he's a big women's college basketball nut. And so he comes in, drops his thread case down at the counter and says, where's your youngest daughter? And they go talk college basketball for an hour. And then he starts selling thread afterwards. He just loves our family and thinks we're really special and the energy between the father and daughter. And he just loves it all. And so I called Mr. Grossman after these guys told me I was an idiot for not having the name. And I said, I'm sorry. I didn't think I needed the name, but now I do. And I know I've always had trouble, doing this about me, but would you do me a favor and call Mark from the thread company and ask him about my family's character? Because, and since then, he was the Kromer cap company. And when I was a kid, this was called a Kromer, period. That's all it was called, a Kromer. And so the Stormy, I don't exactly know who found, I think maybe Hansen Dodge found out his nickname was Stormy. I think they did, but I don't quite remember, but I had knowledge of that nickname then. And so I said, could we possibly separate and I become Stormy Kromer and you stay the Kromer cap company? So that's how we made it work. So yeah, that was tricky. And I, interesting enough, we just added it to the document with no, payment or anything like that. We just did that. So yeah, that was pretty good. And interesting thing that just happened, they recommended, I tell the story, they reminded me when I went back like 2 or 3 weeks later. Now I'm with the creatives people at the place, so Tim and Ken are standing a little further back and the creatives are showing me their ideas. And I remember the first thing I had, it was a black hat and it was graphically drawn by a graphic artist. And there was a hat that looked just like this. So this was in black, done graphically on a piece of paper. And I turned the page and then I saw this for the first time. The story. We just changed a little bit, but it's the same story. We didn't change the wording. We saw it, and then they said, you need to make this the hat with the story. And by the way, when I give the tour every day, I'm in town. I tell a story about a young man I met who compliments us for how good this is. If with your permission, I'm switching stories. With yours and Caitlin's permission, I'm switching stories. Okay. As of today.
Absolutely.
I met a couple he's gone 10 years asking, does anybody, and somebody said, my dad put that story in there. So I'm switching stories, just so you know. So anyway, and then I remember turning the page and seeing the signature on the back. And then I went basically almost across the street and went to an IP lawyer and got it registered trademark. And an interesting story about that, how that all turns out and everything like that. I didn't know anything about this, but I trademarked it in the United States and registered it in Canada. And every time you register it, you're writing a check. And I'm right. I'm hardly selling any hats, and I'm writing checks to Hansen Dodge and to trademark lawyers and da 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 da. And every time you register a trademark, it's another $600, or I think that's what it was back then. And we did United States, Canada, Europe, and then I'm done writing checks, and he says, I know you're not going to want to hear this, but we really recommend you register this in China. And so I took his advice, and in August of 2023, so 21 years later, a website, stormykromer.ch, popped up in complete duplication of our brand, and we were able to shut it down because I got good advice at the beginning, and the trademark was registered. And then the whole thing, the whole launch of us and the whole confidence builder, I mean, everything that became us came from, I don't know if it was Ken or Tim suggesting that this might be a good article for the Milwaukee Journal. I don't remember which one of you two suggested it.
I don't know. I didn't usually have many ideas.
Yeah, right.
I just did the paperwork and sent the bills.
I'm going to assume, Bob, that that's modesty and it was his idea.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming too.
No, I wouldn't assume that. I mean, there's ideas flow pretty well through Hansen Dodge, and so it would, Ken had a lot of ideas. There were so many people when we were working on this. I remember it really clearly, Bob. It was like everybody wanted to work on this. So there was illustrators and designers and writers and Ken and people all over the place wanting to get their hands on helping bring this story to life because it was just such a fun and wonderful, cool story,
That's so cool. So what happened with me was they suggested that they set up an interview with the Journal, and I thought that was the stupidest idea that I'd ever heard. And I was like almost embarrassed driving down, and the interview was in, I don't even know, because I was by myself. You guys weren't with me. I'm almost 100% positive I was alone with her.
Mo Daly wasn't involved? Mo Daly wasn't involved? Because that would have been...
Oh, she might have been.
Yeah.
Mo might have been. Yeah, that might have been it. But I was in your conference room. We used one of your conference rooms. She showed up, the Journal writer, and I'm not wanting to do this. She shows up 5 minutes late. The meeting scheduled from 1 to 2, and she's in the doorway at 5 after 1. And she goes like this, and she looks at her watch, and she looks at me, and she says, I've got 55 minutes. And she's not happy. It's basically my boss sent me to this stupid interview, or Mo called me for this stupid interview, and let's get the ground rules. I'm out of here at 2:00. I'm a busy lady. I've got more important things to do. And I remember I was sitting there, and I just got completely hot and sweaty and yucky. And I remember saying to myself, Bob, what are you doing here? Anyway, we started talking. The interview's over. She's all done. She drops her pencil and pad and takes her glasses off. And now she's coming around the conference table, charging at me with her arms out to give me a hug with this big smile on her face. And when I looked over her shoulder, I can remember I looked at, there's a clock above the door that she had come in, and I looked at it as she was coming at me. And the clock, I'll never forget it, the clock said 17 minutes to 4. So Miss I'm out of here at 2:00 is now hugging and thanking me. And she said, I didn't see this coming. I'm getting my editor to fund a trip up to Ironwood. So up she comes to Ironwood. Now she's got 2 days to waste. She had 55 minutes at first. And what we did was, she walked around the factory and stuff, that typical stuff that she would do and ask lots of questions. And we had, photo albums of old Stormy Kromer stuff. But I knew there was a little bit of a buzz starting in town, the old timers. And there were some stories out of old timers. And when we bought the company, the demographic of the hat was a 74-year-old man. That was it. It was Grandpa's hat.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put an ad in the Ironwood paper saying, does anybody have a Stormy Kromer story? Come to Ben's Cafe, 2:00 on Wednesday. Stormy Kromer's buying free coffee and donuts. And so in came about 15 guys, all men over 70. Two stories were Ted was 76, and he said, when I was 10, my dad had a clothing store in Antigo, Wisconsin, and Stormy Kromer came in and sold my dad hats, and I counted them from Stormy Kromer's trunk onto my dad's counter and talked to Stormy. So he interacted with Stormy Kromer. And then this old timer comes in. He's 84. His name's Otti Nirmala. He's bilingual Finnish, and he's got the cool UP accent with the hard syllable at the beginning and the typical Finnish accent that we have very strongly up in the Upper Peninsula. He's 84, and he's got this old black hat. The hat looks just like yours, Mike. I mean, it's beat up like crazy. And he's got another black hat in a clear plastic bag. And he points to his hat on his head, and he says, "This is my work hat." And then he takes the hat in his plastic bag and he says, "This is my church hat." And when this completely falls apart, this will go in the garbage, and my church hat will become my work hat, and I'll go to the store and get a new church hat.
The Sunday Kromer becomes the work Kromer. Then you get a new Sunday Kromer.
That's it. So anyway, she leaves, and she says, "You don't know this about me, but I'm the boring fourth-page business section writer of the Journal. Monday through Friday, I write those. I just write. I'm a mergers and acquisitions lady." And she looked at her camera that she brought. She said, "That's not even my camera because I never have pictures on my page." And so I had to borrow this from another journalist and all that stuff. So then 3 weeks later, I'm flying from Detroit to the Central Wisconsin airport, and it's Sunday. And I get off the plane, and I get in the terminal, and there's another guy holding the Sunday paper upside down on his left hip. And I go, "Can I look at that? That looks like me on the cover." So there I was, the cover of the Sunday Milwaukee Journal, the big story of the state of Wisconsin. And that article the next day went to 7 or 8 or 9 cities. I know for sure it went to Indianapolis because I have a friend that reached out to me, and I know it went to Lansing, and I know it went to Rockford, Illinois. So it went to those places. And we started making hats. We started making lots of hats. And just to give you an idea what that article and all that whole thing, how it lifted us, was one of the last times I was with Mr. Grossman. I said, "I'm buying a 98-year-old hat company. What's the record? If I'm a competitive person, could I possibly someday maybe break the record?" And he told me what the number was in the 98-year record. It was like 15 years ago then. And I said, without telling anybody, my kids or anything, I said, in 10 years, I'm going to break that record. That was kind of my little personal goal inside, and nobody knew it or anything like that. That article came out 2 weeks before our 1-year birthday. So we're 1 year old. And we started making hats, and it didn't slow down until right around the 1st of February. So 9 weeks later, we could come up for air on how many hats we had sold from that article, because we weren't doing any advertising really or anything like that at all. It was all that article. And I took a breath and said, "Geez, how many hats did we just sell in those last 9 weeks?" In that prior 9 or 10 weeks, we sold 3 times their annual record.
Wow.
In 9 weeks. And that was really everything. I mean, all of that was from the guy sitting to your, I don't know, I can't tell left or right.
Yeah, he's on my right, but
okay. All right.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So Bob, what's the story today? Fast forward for a second. I want to just get a sense of so how many dealers do you guys sell to today?
We had 4 when I started. We have 760 or so, something like that. Still, what are the challenges? We're really great in Wyoming and Montana. I mean, it's really amazing how well we do, but they're not as populated. And we're hugely strong in the Midwest, of course. The biggest thing that happened to us, which is it's such an interesting thing. You got to look at the geography of Michigan. Ironwood is 12 hours away from Detroit. So what happens with the Detroit car industry has no bearing at all on Ironwood, Michigan. Mm-hmm. What I didn't know was what goes on around Detroit, which, a 2-hour radius around Detroit is Ann Arbor and Lansing and Grand Rapids. And that whole bottom of the state of Michigan has so much made in Michigan pride. I don't know if there's another state in the country that has made in Wisconsin. I've never heard the term made in Wisconsin pride. Or made in Minnesota, or I'm not picking on anybody. I've never heard anything like what we discovered as made in Michigan. And we are so strong in Michigan. It's just absolutely incredible. We've been working the stores and, trying to get out into Colorado and trying to get into Northern California and Oregon and in Washington State and in the Northeast. We just keep working at it. It grows just ever so slightly. But what seems to be really happening well right now, Tim, is that we just announced, Gina did this, announced 20 collegiate licenses.
Cool.
And that is really, really doing well. And it's getting us to a whole nother demographic. I mean, every hunter and fisherman already knows about us. We've, infiltrated that.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, we're still selling the Cabela's and Gander and Shields, but we have this amazing partnership with First Light now.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, Bob. Actually, we have some friendships in that circle as well. I've been on the Meat Eater podcast a few times, and Caitlin and I know Steve Ranella and some of the other guys a little bit. We've been fortunate to make those connections, and it's really been cool to see that you guys have partnered with First Light, because again, that's another brand and another group of people that to me feels very authentic in this space and resonates with me in the same way I think that Stormy Kromer does, and really the authenticity of Stormy Kromer's story and the connections with Hansen Dodge and other places. It's really cool to see that.
Yeah, they've been just awesome to work with right now. In fact, they're a very, very, very large customer of ours right now, and they have really great sell through. And then I won't mention the names, but if you're in the clothing business, a lot of people know what happened with UGG boots when a young, beautiful movie star wore UGG boots on a hot day in California grocery shopping, and somebody put the picture in People magazine. And so we're waiting for that to happen yet. I mean, that would be just a fun thing. And there is right now, the Meat Eater guys have a fan. I won't mention his name, but they have a fan who spends a lot of money on our website. And every time he orders, Gina puts a note in, we're a small little company in Northern Michigan. If the next time you're on a stage, would you mind?
Now, Bob, I think it's worth mentioning also, since you brought up Gina. Gina's your daughter, right?
Correct.
And Gina is the president of the company now?
Yeah, she's actually the CEO, and I'm the chairman, so I'm asked not to work as much.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think and Gina's been really instrumental in really expanding the product line offerings too, right?
Yes, yeah. So Gina came back. We are a family as well, and Gina was the young lady, the firstborn, and when she was in 8th grade, she said, "I'm out of here when I'm 18." Just get me out of here. And 12 years in Dallas, very successful and everything like that. And there was a real attraction to Stormy Kromer. So she actually came back to visit. And this house I'm sitting on is on the lake. And it started out as a smaller summer home, and we expanded it, and now it's our only home. But we were sitting looking out on the lake, and you'll get this with the other person in the room, with Tim and Caitlin being there together. But her husband was still in Dallas, and Denise, by the way, there's a Nisi in this house too.
Oh,
just so you guys know.
Everybody needs a Nisi, that I am sure of.
Yeah, so there's a Nisi in this house. We've been married 51 years, and so Denise was sleeping, and Gina and I were having morning coffee, and she said, "You're not ready for this, but I love Stormy Kromer, and I want to come back and work with you and continue your legacy of employing people in Ironwood, Michigan." So that statement I will never forget. And Gina's doing a really good job, and she cracked the nut on how to do this. There's been some complications. I tried it once to do university logos, and it didn't work out. And then Gina did it, and it's working out extremely well. Gina's. It couldn't be better what happened. She's the perfect personality to take it to the next level. And then her sister, KJ, who's the quieter one and is happy to work hard but doesn't need to be out in the front. And she does all the buying, and it's with the dynamics of fabric moving around the world and fabric not available in the United States anywhere because there's no sewing factories in the United States, so there's no reason to have fabric here anymore, and challenges like that. She's doing a great job too. So there's the two daughters and me. So
how many
That's
different
so cool.
how many different products does Stormy Kromer sell now?
I when I bought the business, when you and I started this thing, there were 8 SKUs of black hats and 8 SKUs of red hats. So we started with 16 SKUs, but I have, up until the university licensing program started, I was telling people we have 1,380 SKUs, but we added 320 SKUs with the licensing. So we're like 1,700 different sizes and styles, and we added coats and shirts and then all the little incidental things like cups and magnets and that fun stuff that people want. And I mean,
Yeah.
and there's so many. I mean, the story that Mike and Caitlin have, that's just, I mean, this hat brings out more of those stories than you can imagine, I mean, you can pick up the phone, and I just want you to, pick up the phone. This is Bob. Hello, this is Bob. And somebody says, this is Dan from Shawano. I just want you to know I just bought a new Stormy Kromer hat, put it on my dad, kissed his forehead, and closed the casket. And, it's just the coolest thing to be part of this. This will be the 3rd time, but I do this because I don't have a full day of work. So I still like to sew, but husband passes away. Wife's got a smaller head. She wants to wear his hat. And so I actually personally hand take it apart. I bring it home. Denise irons all the pieces. Then I cut it down to the wife's size and sew it back together again and put his label size and her new label size next to each other. And then she's actually wearing her husband's hat. And we do that. That's the 3rd time I've done it. It's just it's so cool to be part of this brand that has so much meaning to some people, like your hat. It's really cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I guess a couple places I wanted to go with this yet. I mean, one, Tim. I mean, what was it that, like, in that first meeting? I mean, what is it about this story that you think really resonates?
That it's authentic. It's if you look at iconic brands, like even modern iconic brands, there's always a story. And there's always a story almost always a story about a person. So there's common elements to these things that just create the chemistry. And it's part that there's an interesting, unique story. There's community as part of it. There is always creativity and innovation as part of it, right? So, I mean, you think about like interesting brands. Tom's Shoes, really interesting brand that exploded, right? You really unique approach to making shoes and distributing shoes, but giving away one pair of shoes for every pair of shoes they sell. What an amazing way to tie in. Ben & Jerry's ice cream. You can go off brand after brand after brand where there's people involved that had a really interesting story. We're always looking to try to, in marketing, sometimes you're fabricating stories. You're forced to because there's there's no there,
Right.
But when you see a story that has, that just has that level of authenticity, like the idea that this newspaper writer from the Journal would walk in and immediately fall in love with this story, right? I mean, it's just easy to do. I mean, we're sitting here having this conversation with you, Bob, and I've got tears flowing down my face, right? The story about somebody putting that hat on their dad in the coffin. I mean, or how you guys met over it and things like that is just where in the world does that happen today?
I think what's funny is, so the story is, I don't know how many sentences, 4 or 5 or something, and it's about the namesake of the hat, George Stormy Kromer, but there's no story without Ida, and I feel like that's part of it. His love for her and working hard and weathering the elements and working for his family, and then her love and support of him in making him a hat to do it.
Well,
And that resonates with everybody.
Yeah, it's one of the 5 hero stories, right? There's only 5 stories in the world, they say, and this is a hero story like that.
Yeah, and from an outdoor rules standpoint, one of the things that I like about the story is all of the interconnected family elements of it. I was kind of joking to Caitlin earlier, Bob, like Stormy Kromer, the story about this, and his nickname Stormy supposedly was because he had a bit of a temper, which maybe resonates with me a little bit too. My parents called me Mad Dog. My grandpa particularly called me Mad Dog Mike when I was a kid, so I've got a little backstory with that kind of temper. But you can boil it down a little bit and be like, well, the story of Stormy Kromer is there's a guy with a bad temper who can't keep his hat on.
Yeah,
it's really Ida. I mean, it's really Ida taking the idea and making it something that is important. And I don't want to take anything away from Stormy in that, but it's a family story, and it's a family story with the hat itself. Bob, it's a family story with you and your family taking the company and sort of resurrecting it and making it what it is today. For us personally, it's a family story, both Tim's involvement and Caitlin and I. So it's just like, I think it's that authenticity and it's that connectedness, right? That for me anyway, make it such a special thing. And obviously it's broader than that. It's not just us. This resonates with lots of people all over the country.
And that's what's been the growth when Tim asks. It's just kind of, you can't believe, that record that we talk about, we make that hat every 4, 5, or 6 days. We made that the record number now. That's where we are right now. That's where the business is at right now, where it's pretty good size. And from a family standpoint, it really did save the company. Because now it is the guiding light of the company. It is the presence. And, our family, one of the fun things is our families, no matter where the girls are and what we try really hard to watch It's a Wonderful Life every Christmas. Okay. And, when
my favorite movie of all time, by the way, just go on record.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. It's my favorite movie of all time.
It's mine too, and I didn't grow up with much, and so I was 25 or 26, and my business wasn't much then. But I saw this man realizing he had an impact on his community, and it really made a big impression on me. And I thought, holy mackerel, could I ever do that? Could I be a business person and have an impact on my community? Well, every day, I don't know, a couple hundred people come to Ironwood to buy from the factory store, and they and 20 or 30 of them take the factory tour with me, and I go, and it ends just before lunch, and then I see half of them in the same places I'm having lunch, and so we are having a little effect on our community, and that's just a big sense of pride. The Michigan governors, the last 2 governors, they take Stormy Kromer hats on trade missions. Like, there was a $300 million deal done with a company in Europe, and their thank you gift was 2 Stormy Kromer hats with the Pure Michigan logo on it.
That's cool.
I suppose that's better than a bottle of jam, but
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I wanted to sort of mention that too, because I think it's easy to look at marketing and advertising through a really cynical lens, and that you're being sold something, and at some level you are, but I also think it's important, and I like that element of this story that you and Tim connected, over this authentic story and identified it as something good. And yeah, it's a business that grew out of that, but it's a business that has impacted, your community there, Bob, and a lot of people in a really positive way. So, I feel like maybe uniquely because of our story, I've been impacted positively by Stormy Kromer. But, just as an outdoorsman, even, God forbid, if I had never met Caitlin, I would still have a very positive feeling about Stormy Kromer, and I would still own Stormy Kromer gear that served me well in the field. And so that connection of you and Tim, working together through marketing to get the story out there, and then you making great products at Stormy Kromer, that is important for me as an outdoorsman. But, I think it's also kind of amazing that it all comes together to be this really positive thing with a Michigan-made and American-made product, right? And you're employing people in your community. You're having an impact that was a lifelong goal for you to have there. And it's just, gosh, it's like you said, Tim, it's a Russian nesting doll story inside a story inside a story for us.
Yeah, and let me tell you, just you okay? We're running late. You want to?
Oh no, we can go forever.
So, I owned Stormy Kromer about 7 years, and my 84-year-old mother came to the retail counter and said, "Can I talk to my son?" And so she comes back into my office. Now, keep in mind, her father committed suicide when my mother was pregnant with me. So he died in May, and I was born in September. And he committed suicide. We're Catholic. That was a disgrace. And not only that, it was a mortal sin to commit suicide. So he was sent to hell for doing that. That was what the Italians believed. So, and so we never talked much about him. And so there was nothing at all. Never. They were poor, so I didn't even know what the guy looked like or anything like that. So my mother comes into my office, and she's holding something in her hand, smaller than the palm of her hand, and she's been crying. And she says, "Your father doesn't know this story." And she's serious. And I said, "Okay." And she said, "I was 24 years old when Grandpa committed suicide. I lost my best friend. I was absolutely devastated. And hormones were flowing because I was pregnant with you, and it was just a horrible, horrible time." And 10 days after the funeral, the Italian tradition was to burn everything that belonged to him because he's out of the family. So they made a bonfire in the back. His hunting rifles, his boots, all of his photos, everything got burnt in this ceremonial, ugly Italian ceremony. And she said, "I couldn't give up the memory of my grandfather." So and she cans this to me, and she said, this is picture has been hidden in my wallet ever since that day. And I now am looking at this picture that's smaller than a wallet picture, about 3/4 the size of a present day wallet picture. And it's my grandpa wearing a Stormy Kromer hat.
Oh, man.
Wow.
He's the one that worked for the same railroad. And now he's the one I've gone to trade shows with Grandpa blown up life-size behind me, with that picture blown up wearing his black Stormy Kromer hat. He worked for the same railroad as Stormy Kromer and everything like that.
Wow.
You talk about meant to be at my place. It's pretty special that my grandpa, and then we asked, we put an ad in the paper, Ironwood paper, does anybody have old photos that we could make copies of or something? And one of my mother's cousins brought in a family picture. And so we've got actually 2 pictures of the same grandpa. And he's wearing a Stormy Kromer hat in both pictures. So this is really more special. It's almost as special as it is to you meeting Caitlin. It's pretty cool.
Wow.
Gosh, thanks for telling the story, Bob. It's
It's
amazing.
our family. Yeah. It's pretty cool to be doing this. Yeah. And it's a good future for the girls. It's got leverage. We've got a couple of big pending partnerships happening. We're going to announce one with a big organization this fall yet that we're really excited about. And yeah, it's, we get calls from the big people now. I mean, it's just crazy what, it's like, you know how small we are? We're just a little engine. We're just a little engine that could, and it's pretty cool. People have really been great to us, and, it's just a wonderful thing.
Well, I have a request, Bob.
Oh, no.
Absolutely. Anything you want, Tim.
Well, I'd like you to be. I'd like this from this day forward. You remember Powder Milk Biscuits, the official sponsor of Garrison Keillor and Prairie Home Companion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think Stormy Kromer should be the unofficial or official, sponsor of the Outdoor Rules podcast.
Okay. Well, how do I go about? Who is their agent?
Yeah, you need one of those.
Yeah, I think the Outdoor Rules podcast is still in the pre-you visiting Mr. Grossman phase of business.
Well,
here.
let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Let's figure a way to have fun with that.
Yeah.
For sure. At the very least, Stormy Kromer can be the unofficial apparel company of the Outdoor Rules podcast. I think
Can I offer you a dozen autographed? A frosty head only looks good on beer posters that you can give to your guests.
Oh man, like that would be amazing. Yeah.
No, I would love to do something. Honestly, Tim, you didn't put me under pressure or anything. I'd love to do something.
Yeah, I'm kind of teasing you, but just based upon how these podcasts go, you already are sort of the an unofficial. Voice of
you absolutely are, Bob. I have two brothers, and we kind of started this thing. And my younger brother, he got married right after we did, right, Caitlin? A couple years or something.
Yeah, a few years.
Anyway, they wore Stormy Kromer vests. We all wore Stormy Kromer vests in Mark's wedding. In fact, it's hanging behind Caitlin over there.
Okay, got it.
We've got all kinds of stuff. In fact, I don't want to go without telling. This is maybe my favorite.
One last story yet?
My favorite Stormy Kromer story. This I'm holding it up for Bob. This is a rancher, and it's got a few problems. You can stick your fingers through it in a couple of places. And this was an extraordinarily cold Montana day where we were hunting on some publicly accessible places where you had to use a weapon other than a rifle. And so Caitlin bought me a big hunting handgun for a wedding gift of all things. I'll say I'm sorry to my mother-in-law. I've totally ruined her precious daughter. But anyway, I had that.
Wow.
We were out hunting, and we had that handgun, and a beautiful buck came out, and I needed something else to rest on, and the rest I had wasn't high enough, and I took that rancher hat off my head, which was serving me very well to keep warm, and I stuck it under the revolver, and I got the deer, but it turns out the flames that come out the front of the cylinder on the revolver totally blew holes in my very nice Stormy Kromer Ranger. Yeah, it's got 3 or 4 different spots where you can stick your finger through it. So
I see that.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I did not shoot the hat. I often get accused by people of having shot the hat, which is not exactly what happened.
Gosh, Mike, that's crazy.
Yeah. Got to be careful with those hunting handguns, I suppose. But I know, Caitlin, you've got some really kind of cherished and favorite.
Yeah. No, I like the Ida stuff. I like the ponytail hole in my Ida Kromer for sure. That's actually at work right now, so I don't have it to display. But the other thing I have had probably for 15 years, and I think it might be about time for me to invest in some new ones. But I've got these mittens. These they've got the work glove on the one side, and anyways, I've had these since my first days working in Yellowstone, where I'd work in the wolf program, and we'd be out 30 days early winter, 30 days late winter, and we'd spend pre-dawn to post-dusk out in the field, basically monitoring wolf packs. And so I tried a few things, in those cold days, because it could be 20, it could be 20 below zero. And sometimes you were moving, but sometimes you were just sitting there, camped out, watching wolf behavior all day. But in the end, my favorite thing was these mittens to wear. My hands really stayed warmest in these. If it was below zero, I might throw some hand warmers in there to help me out. But this is probably my most cherished Kromer object, I'd say.
Yeah, and I only have one complaint about those. I feel like those are maybe the only piece of Kromer gear that ever did us dirty, and it was a day that a late deer hunting trip in Montana, and Caitlin and I, we had horses at the time that we were using, and we packed a wonderful lunch. We were going to go deer hunting all day horseback, and
we're not really I'm not really good at planning. Like, this was uncharacteristic for us to take time the night before, lay everything out, make sure we were squared away with all the essentials. So
right.
We were feeling really good about ourselves going into this. Yeah.
We got up at 3 a.m, caught horses, loaded them up, got up the mountain, and realized that we had left our beautiful lunch in the refrigerator at home. And between us, for this whole day of hunting, all we had was one Halloween candy-sized box of Milk Duds, right?
Yeah, that was it.
And Caitlin was wearing those gloves, and I think she took one off, opened the box, and poured the Milk Duds into her other gloved hand.
Mitten. It's a mitten.
Mitten hand, and they all but one Milk Dud escaped into the snow, bounced off of her mittens. And so in total that day, our food supply ended up being one Milk Dud.
One Milk Dud.
One very, very frozen Milk Dud, which is quite hard to share.
We should point out that it really wasn't the mittens' fault that we didn't have our lunch. But
I don't think any of it was actually the mittens' fault.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So we really, we genuinely do not do almost anything outside that there's not 2, 3, 4 pieces of Stormy Kromer gear on. We've had them for our babies. I have a picture I'll share when we post the podcast of Robert at 2 months old in a Kromer cap. So, yep, it's really Bob. I just can't explain to you how thankful I am that you were willing to come on and talk to us, and just, really how much we've enjoyed Stormy Kromer over the years. And we did come to Ironwood once. We took the tour and you gave it, and we had great fun doing that. And I would, totally suggest that as something to do. It's really kind of amazing to see an American company doing, so much work right there in small town USA. Really, really an awesome thing.
Was Tim with you that time or not?
He was, yep.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was talking about Tim and you were hiding in the back row.
Right.
You really did. It was another genuine moment where you told this whole story, and we're kind of standing there, and I'm like, why is Tim not speaking up?
Yeah, he was hiding, and then he said, "Hi, Bob."
He totally was.
Well, we ended up there. We were up. Caitlin and Mike were back in Wisconsin for a week or so, and
I was pregnant with Robert at the time.
Were you?
Yeah.
And we were kind of up in northern Wisconsin, fishing and hanging out, and decided to not fish for the day. And so, what should we do? And Mike said, "Let's go see the Stormy Kromer factory." And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds cool. Well, let's go do that." So that's why we ended up. That's how we ended up there that day.
Yeah.
I remember just you there. There were, when there's tours, there's so many people. There's so much going on. It's hard to remember it all.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's again, it's kind of amazing. Like, you're a real business. Like, Stormy Kromer is a real thing, doing a lot of work, and then to go. We didn't schedule it with you. We didn't know that Bob, that you would be the one giving the factory tour, and to go and actually get that tour from you is a really special thing. So,
yeah, I love doing it, and it's. Every day I get to be with the people that make the hats, even now that I'm supposed to be retired. It's a pretty special thing for me to do that. And just, here's Mary. Look at what a great job she does. And they're just so proud of that. The first impression from a tourist is that, we're bothering these people and we're intimidating them and they're nervous. And, we do it every day and they just love having you guys come through. So it's just lots of fun.
Yeah, well,
not many factories have people interact with them and say, "Wow, do you do this for a living? And you make this hat?" And it's it's not many factory workers get that kind of feedback.
Right.
yeah.
So
And again, it puts me in mind of family and the way I grew up. My dad's dad in particular really loved to kind of go check out things exactly like Stormy Kromer. He would have loved it. He took us when we were kids to the largest hardwood sawmill on the East Coast, some sort of factory tour of drying kilns and giant saws. And I think that is a little bit of a dying thing, and it's really worth seeing. I mean, it's really worth seeing that kind of American spirit in action. Just the whole story and what it means to the communities, and it's great. I really commend you on doing that, Bob, and thank you for giving us the tour when we were there.
Yeah, this was fun, guys. Yes.
Yep. No, absolutely. So thanks so much, Bob. You got anything you want to close out with?
No, I think this was just really special. I didn't know what to expect, but it was even better. I thought it was going to be fun, and I was really looking forward to it, but it was a lot nicer than I actually thought. So this was cool.
Well, thank you for the kind words.
It's awesome to see you.
Yeah.
Give my best to
Tim.
Gina.
Nice to meet you, Caitlin and Mike. And
Yep, you too.
Likewise. Maybe we'll bring the boys to Ironwood the next time we can swing it.
We'll do some special things if you do. You got my number, so stay in touch.
Thanks so much, Bob. Thanks.
Yep.
Tim and Caitlin.
Of course.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. As always, you can find all of our content on our website, www.outdoorrules.com. We'll definitely get some Stormy Kromer links up there, maybe to some of our favorite products on the episode page for today. We're on Instagram at Outdoor Rules, and we've got a Facebook page as well. And, as always, what we value most is hearing from people, and you can always reach us by email, outdoorrules@gmail.com. So, all right. Thanks again, everybody.
Take it easy.
Hunting and fishing, the great outdoors, mixing history, laughter, love, and folklore, creating memories with family and friends. These are the trophies that matter in the end. Outdoor Rules.